Their footprints disappeared behind them as they walked. At first, Alex thought it was the wind. The snow had fallen in quiet sheets overnight, softening the edges of the trail on the northern ridge. The forest pressed in around them, tall pines bending under the weight of frost, and the only sound was the rhythmic crunch of boots on compacted snow. Their companions, Mara and Jonas, paused briefly to tighten scarves, their breaths clouding in the brittle air. Alex turned to look back at the path they'd come, expecting a trail of footprints etched into the white slope. There was nothing. No indentations, no crushed snow, no evidence that they had ever been there at all. Alex blinked, thinking the glare of the overcast sky must have washed it out. But Mara and Jonas' eyes widened behind their scarves, shadows of confusion flickering across their faces. "Did you?" Mara began, then shook her head. "I mean, there should be." "Nothing," Alex said, voice tight. "No footprints. Not mine, not yours." Jonas laughed nervously, though it trembled. "Probably one of those weird snow things. Sunlight reflection or, I don't know. Let's keep moving." They did, but the forest seemed to inhale around them. Each crunch of their steps echoed unnaturally loud between the trunks. Every frozen branch overhead looked poised to snap, releasing some unseen threat. And when Alex glanced down again, waiting for any trace of themselves in the snow, there was still nothing. By mid-afternoon, the trail began to twist unnaturally. The ridge that had felt wide and open in the morning narrowed to a corridor of pines whose branches clawed at them. The wind had picked up, carrying the sharp scent of pine resin and something else. Metallic, bitter, faintly like iron blood. Alex's stomach knotted. There was a sense of being watched. Not glimpsed from the periphery, but felt. Like unseen eyes tracing each step, waiting for a mistake. "Do you feel that?" Alex asked, voice low. Mara glanced around, teeth chattering. "Yeah. It's just the wind, right?" Jonas didn't answer. He hadn't looked back in a while. He hadn't looked forward either, his gaze fixed on some point deeper in the shadows. The crunch of snow beneath their boots sounded wrong, hollow, as though it was a recording of a sound rather than the sound itself. Alex stopped, raising a gloved hand. The others halted as well. The forest behind them was silent, too silent. The kind of silence that presses on your eardrums, makes the blood in your head hum. And then, faintly, from somewhere behind, a crunch echoed. It was their own footsteps. Alex turned sharply. "That's impossible," they whispered. Mara's scarf flapped in the wind. "What was that?" Jonas' face was pale. "Footsteps. Mine. Yours. There." He broke off, eyes wide. "They're right there. Behind us." Alex spun, but there was nothing. The snow was pristine. A shiver climbed their spine, and for a fraction of a second, the world felt fragile, as though it could shatter if they breathed too hard. They pressed on. The sun, already low, cast long, jagged shadows across the path, turning every snow-covered stump into a crouched figure. Alex noticed that the light itself seemed wrong. Shadows stretching backward, not forward, bending against logic. The footprints they expected should have appeared in that light were still missing. Not only missing, they were erased, as if the forest itself had swallowed them. By the time twilight bled into deep indigo, they had left the main ridge trail behind. The pines thickened, trunks forming black columns that flickered in the failing light. Alex's breath came in short, ragged bursts. "Maybe we're going in circles," Mara murmured. Alex frowned. "We couldn't be. We've been moving north." "The sun." They stopped speaking, because the sun was gone. It had vanished in a sudden, unnatural sweep, leaving only a violet-gray gloom. The forest, which had been claustrophobic, now felt endless. Every tree looked the same. Every bend in the trail was identical to the last. And still, there were no footprints. Then, a voice, soft, lilting, almost a whisper carried by the wind, cut through the air. "Don't leave." Alex froze, heart hammering. The others tensed beside them. The voice was close, yet everywhere. It sounded like themselves speaking, but not their own voices. Jonas swallowed audibly. "Who's there?" he called. No reply. Alex's gaze fell to the snow, and a nauseating realization struck. They could no longer see the way they had come. Not even the faintest hint of the ridge or the path. It was as if the forest had grown around them, erasing the trail of existence itself. Their previous steps, where had they gone? The footprints that should have marked their passage were never there. It wasn't just snow or wind. It was impossibility. They walked faster, branches snapping underfoot, snow spraying in scattered clouds. But the crunch of their boots remained faint, distant, like it belonged to someone else. And always, somewhere behind them, that same faint echo followed. A rustle to the right, a shadow that moved against the dim light. Alex spun, heart in their throat, but the shape dissolved into the pines, leaving only silence. When they looked down, the snow under their boots didn't deform. Their footprints never existed. Panic blossomed, cold and inescapable. What if we never were here? Mara whispered, voice trembling. Like, the forest doesn't want us to exist? Jonas pressed a hand to his mouth, eyes darting. I think it's erasing us. Step by step. Alex's mind reeled. The trail of disappearing footprints, the wrong shadows, the echoing footsteps behind them. All of it was pointing to a single terrifying truth. They weren't just being watched. They were being consumed, stripped from reality as though the world rejected their presence. They stumbled forward, blindly, until the snow thinned and the pines opened onto a slope. There, under the ghostly wash of twilight, was the faintest shimmer. A mirror of snow, pristine and untouched. And in it, their footprints. Or rather, footprints. Not theirs exactly. Too small, too elongated, irregular, like something was imitating them. Step for step, it mirrored their movement, growing closer even as they ran. Alex grabbed Mara and Jonas, shaking them. Run! But the ground beneath their feet didn't respond the way it should. The snow shifted, rippling underfoot like liquid. And as the echoing footprints advanced, Alex realized they hadn't been walking into the forest. They had been walking into something else entirely. Something vast, patient, and deliberate. The next moment it happened. The snow beneath them vanished, and with it, their own sense of self. Mara screamed, then silence. Jonas reached for Alex, and Alex for him, but their hands passed through nothing. The footsteps behind them ceased, paused, then retreated in perfect, mirrored unison. Alex felt themselves being pulled backward, upward, into the void of unformed space. The forest, the trail, the pines, all melted into a whiteness that was colder than snow, deeper than night. And in that whiteness, the truth clawed at the edges of their mind. They had never been really there. Not in any way the world recognized. The footprints had never been theirs. They had been a warning, a lure, and now, perhaps, a replacement. The last thought that scraped through Alex's consciousness, before even that dissolved, was a single horrific certainty. The forest doesn't just erase your steps. It erases you, and someone or something always walks in your place. When the wind whispered through the pines, it carried no trace of three hikers. Only the faint echo of footprints, melting into snow that never remembered them. The air around the fire pit felt warmer than the flames. Sam rubbed their arms, expecting the chill of the forest night, but the warmth that pressed against their skin made goosebumps crawl backward. It wasn't the fire. The flames danced timidly in the center of the pit, pale tongues flickering against logs blackened with old ash, barely radiating any heat at all. Yet the air itself seemed to pulse, as though breathing, as though alive. "Do you feel that?" Lena asked, voice low, barely above the rustle of leaves. She leaned toward the circle of firelight, her hands drawn into her sleeves. "Yeah," Sam said, glancing around. The forest beyond the clearing was dark, dense, swallowing stars and moon alike. Every tree seemed still, yet the shadows stretched inward, leaning toward them, like the forest itself was listening. "Maybe it's just the ground," John muttered, kicking at a patch of soil near the fire pit. The dirt smelled damp, but beneath the wet loam there was a faint, acrid tang, like scorched iron. Maybe the earth's holding heat from the day. Sam shook their head. No, it's different. It moves. I can feel it shifting around us. The warmth curled, circling around their ankles, brushing against the backs of their legs like a living thing. They jumped slightly, glancing at each other. It was subtle, almost polite at first, but insistence lurked beneath it. Every pulse of heat was timed to their movements, quickening when they moved, settling when they froze. They tried to focus on the fire, on the small comfort of flames. But even the flames seemed wrong. Each flicker bent in strange arcs, leaning not with the wind but toward the warmth itself, like the fire were being tugged by something invisible. Sparks rose, then curved sharply, as if fleeing from the air around the pit. Sam squinted, watching, wondering if the logs themselves were moving in response, ever so slightly, to some secret rhythm beneath the soil. Silence fell, heavy, draping over them like wet cloth. And then came the sounds, not of wind or animals, but a faint thrum beneath the campsite. Low, resonant, like a pulse emanating from the ground itself. The sound seemed to echo from under their feet, vibrating through the bones in their legs. Each thump coincided with a shiver of warmth. It was slow at first, like a heartbeat, then accelerating in uneven spurts, urging them to move, to react. I think it's alive, Lena whispered. Her voice cracked, almost lost beneath the subtle roar of the unseen pulse. Whatever this is, it's watching us. Sam's stomach turned. The warmth had thickened around their torso now, a suffocating embrace, pressing on the chest and back, leaving gooseflesh in its wake. The flames in the pit flickered in sync with the sensation, tiny shadows leaping across their faces like insects in heat. They tried to laugh, shake it off, but the sound caught in their throat. It didn't feel like laughter, didn't feel like anything human. Time began to stretch. Sam glanced at John, then at Lena, then back at the fire pit. The logs were the same logs, yet subtly different. Darker, slick with moisture that hadn't been there before. Sparks rose, and for a fraction of a second, each one seemed to linger midair, hovering as though considering whether to fall or float. Every crackle of the fire sounded muffled, like it was happening underwater. I think we've been here longer than we should, John said finally. He turned to glance around the perimeter of the clearing. The trees didn't seem to end. The forest folded back on itself, doubling, tripling, impossibly dense. The stars they'd seen when they arrived had disappeared. No moon, no constellations, only the pulsing warmth, beating in rhythm with the hidden thrum beneath their feet. Do you remember setting up the tent? Sam asked. Lena frowned. I don't. Did we? I think we did. But maybe we didn't. Her words faltered. She shook her head. I'm not sure. Something feels off. The fire reacted. The flames bent sharply toward Lena, flickering as though acknowledging her uncertainty. Sparks rose and circled, forming tiny arcs that twisted and collapsed back into the logs. Every movement they made seemed mirrored, amplified, distorted by the invisible presence. The warmth tightened, a living coil around their bodies, whispering insistently against skin and bone. The ground beneath them shifted, subtle at first, a gentle vibration, then stronger, like some immense heartbeat pulsing through soil and roots. Sam's knees buckled slightly, not from weakness but from recognition. Whatever lived beneath them was old, ancient, patient. It had waited for this moment, for them to arrive, to stumble across its clearing. The forest, the fire, the very air, they were responding. The warmth pulsed in arcs, sweeping from Lena to Sam to John, always circling, never touching but never leaving. Shadows bowed inward from the periphery of the clearing, like the trees themselves were curving, bending to the unseen energy. Maybe it wants something, John whispered. Maybe we're chosen? Sam didn't answer. Words seemed useless. The warmth had grown unbearable now, thickening into a living pressure that filled lungs and ears, vibrating at a frequency felt more than heard. A faint whisper echoed beneath the soil, low and guttural, yet distinct. Stay. They froze, every instinct screaming that movement, thought, and breath were futile. The fire hunched in the pit, flames bowing into arcs that reached outward toward the invisible presence. The sparks moved like fireflies caught in a magnetic field, never landing, never leaving, always hovering between existence and impossibility. Minutes or hours, Sam could not tell, passed in oppressive stillness. The warmth slowed, then pulsed more deliberately, as if studying them individually, acknowledging each fear, each hesitation. Time folded over itself. Sam's memory blurred. Had they arrived tonight? Yesterday? They could not recall the journey, the trail, the forest approach. Only the fire, the warmth, the pulse. Then, without warning, the warmth drew back slightly. Not entirely, never entirely, but enough that the skin could breathe again. The fire's flames curved upward, illuminating the clearing in an otherworldly glow, casting long, dancing shadows that pointed inward, toward the fire pit's center. And in that center, the logs seemed ordinary again, but the air above shimmered faintly, like heat rising from a desert road in the middle of summer. Sam looked at Lena, then John. Neither spoke, both watching the subtle movement of shadows and fire, the undulating air, the way warmth seemed to breathe independently of flame. And they understood, without words, that the campsite had marked them. They had arrived at a place older than memory, a presence that had waited patiently, and it had noticed them. A single, terrifying certainty lodged in Sam's mind. The warmth wasn't merely heat. It was awareness. It had followed them from the moment they crossed the threshold of the clearing, watched their hesitation, measured their fear. And now it had chosen to acknowledge them. The air shifted again, a pulse against their skin that felt almost like a heartbeat, slow and deliberate. The fire flames rose a few inches higher, bowing slightly, as though yielding to the invisible gaze that hung above and beneath the clearing. The forest beyond did not breathe. The stars did not return. Only the warmth, steady and sentient, radiated outward, circling the fire pit, pulsing against them like a living thing, patient, ancient, and unblinking. And Sam knew they were not just visitors. They were guests, observed, considered, chosen. The fire's smoke curled lazily into the darkness, but the heat lingered, alive and aware, pressing against skin and consciousness alike. It would remain with them long after the flames died, a memory of presence, a proof that something older than the forest had awakened, and that it had decided they belonged, for reasons they would never understand. Sam drew a slow, shallow breath, feeling the warmth pulse once more against their chest, and realized, too late, that the forest had already claimed their awareness, and perhaps, in time, everything else.